Not before.
All right. Thank you for joining the City of Kingston's Arts Commission at our monthly meeting. Today is April 8th. My name is Adrielle Farr, Director of Art and Cultural Affairs for the City of Kingston and organizer for today's virtual meeting. Before we begin our meeting, we would like to go over a few meeting guidelines to help us navigate the system as efficiently and respectfully as possible. We ask that members of the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. As organizer, I reserve the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. Commission members and city staff will control their own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the city's website at a later date. If you are not included on the agenda, please be respectful and courteous to our commission members by remaining muted. If you have any audio issues or technical difficulties, please send a text message to the following number, 845-399-9072, or utilize the chat. As the organizer for today's meeting, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. Lastly, at tonight's meeting, we have in attendance Arts Commission Chair Susan Lynn, Arts Commission members Ann Bailey, Peter Criswell, Laura Giordano, Ward Mintz, Ione, and Lynn Woods. For non-voting members, we have Maya Frieden, Lilia Perez, and myself. Thank you for your patience during these difficult times, and on behalf of the City of Kingston, I wish you and your family good health. I now turn the floor over to Chair Susan Lynn, who will call the meeting to order.
Okay. Laura, the agenda, is that just the one that you sent the other day asking for? You're muted.
It's bigger, but I sent it to Addie so that she put it on the website so that it's there.
Got it. Okay.
But can you get that? Do you?
Yeah. Give me just a sec.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
You just use that link and you head to the Arts Commission. It should bring it right there.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, where is the agenda?
If you click on it, the agenda is like at the top. There's a link to the Zoom, and then there's also a link to the agenda.
Oh, yes, I see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes? And are there any additions, corrections, or whatevers?
I think there's a couple of little corrections. Very
It would
small
not be a
typos.
meeting without Lynn making a correction.
I know, isn't it a pain in the butt?
It's great. It's great.
Let's
Somebody's
see, there
doing it.
should be a, this is my old copy editing hat. There should be a apostrophe after Linda Law and the Holo Center. Second line, the Holo Center apostrophe S.
Okay,
And under the MAD, going down below Midtown Arts District, there's a "the" that's just left hanging at the end of that paragraph.
okay, but nothing contextual.
No.
Okay,
Not that I could see.
okay. Anybody want to make a motion? Laura?
I'll second that.
Peter, okay. Okay, so how are arts organizations surviving COVID? Laura, Ward, and Lilia.
That's right.
I think we should go to Lilia first. I think she's the expert on this.
Mhm.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, so for anyone who ends up watching this, I'm Lilia Perez. I'm the Grants and Programs Manager from Arts Mid-Hudson. And Laura asked me if I could come today and talk a little bit about how arts and cultural organizations are faring due to COVID-19. Before this meeting, I don't have a formal presentation prepared, but what, the benefit of our position at Arts Mid-Hudson is we give out a lot of funding from Ulster County, Dutchess County, and the New York State Council on the Arts for arts and cultural programs. And we get reports into us and applications into us, and we ask on a lot of those for them to tell us how COVID has affected the organization. So I kind of combed through all of that today and took a look at some of the trends that I saw. And then I'll also kind of add some other things that I've noticed in my work and how Arts Mid-Hudson is responding as well. So, first of all, some general notes. I think one thing to be said overall is that performing arts is definitely the hardest hit. Music, dance, theater rental, or, performing arts rental facilities and movie theaters are definitely the hardest hit. And New York State is still advising 33% capacity or no more than 100 people indoors for all performance venues. And for some of the larger venues like UPAC, right, that's just not enough people to have there to justify the staff and the resource and the utilities that it takes to put on events. So even though there are some allowances that New York State is making in terms of allowing places to reopen, they may not be feasible for a lot of organizations in actuality. I would say overall, it's my observation that underserved audiences are getting less programming over this time. I would say by and large, there's a very serious interest in serving underserved communities and really focusing on a specific community that an organization can serve really well, as opposed to previously when there was so much momentum within the arts and cultural sector in our region. And before the pandemic hit, it was like really blossoming and expanding. And there's been this contraction due to the need to just survive and get through this. And then also like really focusing on, okay, we know that we can really reach out to this audience. So we're going to do just that. And I think, as much as organizations want to do more, and this is my next point, there's been a very serious amount of layoffs, furloughs of staff due to COVID-19. And so even if organizations are getting more aspirational during this time, the resources they have at their disposal to execute those ideas is limited. Let me see what else. So organizations are in need of funding to update their facilities, their equipment. And they're also dealing with ever-changing guidelines on what they need. So if they had outfitted their facility in, August of last year when the CDC was still really focused on contact contamination due to COVID and disinfecting surfaces and stuff like that, they might go at a different approach than what they're asking to do now, where there's this renewed, they're less of a focus on contact-based transmission and on respiratory transmission. So organizations are trying to adapt, but they're also not trying to adapt too quickly until they really know what they need to do. So it's kind of like a difficult situation that a lot of organizations are finding themselves in. And then of course, there's the limited funding to do that. And then, with equipment, the need to do virtual programming, online programming, that there's a need in terms of expertise on staff and equipment that comes along with that. That's also a financial need. Economically, as we probably all know, reduced revenue, contributed income is down overall for many organizations. The utility bills are a huge burden, on used or unused spaces. And also their expenses are down, which means less payments to artists, less payments to local businesses that benefited. And then of course, tourism is impacted in some places more than others. Obviously, we know there've been a lot of people coming up from the New York City area to our region during COVID-19 to get away. And so, for example, I was reading a report earlier from Beacon, and they were saying that they haven't seen much of a tourism slow at all. Whereas in other parts of the county, they were seeing, more tourism, and it's a less of a destination on the train line spot like Beacon is. And so they're seeing reduced tourism. I would say the trends overall with programming is still very much favoring virtual programming and outdoor programming. And some of the, bad trends I'm seeing are obviously a lot of furloughed and laid off staff, which I talked about before. As we know, due to the pandemic, there's been a huge shift in terms of the demographics of our region. There's been a very big threat of gentrification, which has always been a threat in our region, but is getting amplified and worsened, which is of course affecting employees of arts and culture organizations and also the audiences that those organizations depended on and were their regular audiences. And so we're seeing new organizations pop up in the area. And in some cases, they're fulfilling an otherwise unmet need where they weren't something we had in the region before. But we're seeing a lot that are kind of competing with some of the organizations that have been here for a really long time and are bringing in resources that other organizations here don't have access to because they were situated in a much more affluent area before. This is an interesting thing I read a few times today, that all volunteer organizations, they've been ineligible for a lot of the COVID related relief programs, such as the Shuttered Venue Operating Grant, that you have to have employees to apply for some of those. And I just heard today that, the Shuttered Venue Operating Grant, that system opened today for people to submit and it crashed immediately. So, they're dealing limited staff, dealing with trying to access some of these funds and then dealing with lots of technical issues, so it's not a great combination. Some of the bright points I'm seeing, definitely a renewed strong interest in collaboration. I've seen so many organizations collaborating with each other. I read earlier today about MAD and ASK collaborating last year in one of our final reports. I know that in Dutchess County, Rhinebeck Performing Arts Center has partnered with County Players for this summer, and that was really exciting. I mean, County Players down in Wappingers, Rhinebeck Performing Arts is up in Rhinebeck, and they were two that, might be considered competing theaters in a regular non-COVID year, and now they're working together because they need to make sure that they both come out on the other side of this. Also seeing a very strong interest for organizations to do diversity, equity, access, and inclusion work, and then go beyond that towards restructuring the power structures within their organization. We've received some requests for funding for that this year, requests and grants awarded for strategic planning, and a lot of organizations reevaluating their mission and purpose right now. And also organizations getting more tech savvy, upping their online presence, moving towards virtual programming, which is expanding access. But then going back to one of my earlier points about underserved audiences getting less access to programming this year, there's been a lot of move towards virtual programming, and we all know that there is an internet access issue in Ulster County and for many households, or access to the devices needed to access those, even if they have access to the internet. Kids sharing, laptops with their parents who are working from home, kids who are doing virtual school. It's just, a lot of demand for these devices and for access to the internet, and some families that don't have access to that stuff at all. And so this move towards online programming is definitely negatively impacting a lot of those people. But of course, we have a situation where a lot of organizations do not have the capacity to go to in-person programming at all. And I clearly see that in terms of what they're doing. In terms of granting, and I'll wrap up, I feel like I've been talking for a while, but in terms of granting trends, at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a clear shift towards emergency funding. We had a lot of funds delayed. Anyone who applied to our decentralization program know it got really delayed because we were waiting for word from our funder, which thankfully came in without any cut. And, a lot of the, because some of the stimulus bills that have gone by and economic revitalization bills that have gone out, we have been able to see that trickle down to us in that our funding wasn't cut from New York State. Our funding is staying pretty much level with last year from Ulster County, for example. And I'm seeing that continuation of the emergency funding, but I'm also seeing a lot of exciting new grant opportunities pop up that are a little more open-ended, and a definite move from grantors towards kind of, focus on working with the grantee, funding more of the organization instead of the project itself, because now we know projects can change like this because of outside circumstances. And so an interest in saying, well, we really want to support what this organization is doing. So even if the project shifts a little bit, that'll be okay. But of course, going back to some of the negatives, that we have less staff on for a lot of these organizations and less people who can put together really compelling grant proposals. Overall, I'm seeing that organizations that are applying for things and are being very upfront and aware about how COVID could impact the project are doing better in granting pools, and there needs to be clearly showing that they're adaptable. And then I also just like in some of the key things I saw Kingston organizations list in their reporting to us, membership being down, loss of revenue, the move towards hybrid programming, meaning doing something in person, but also having an online component that complements it. A lot of big fundraisers, big events, annual events were canceled last year. And some are even saying things like we have had no income at all since March. So I think this paints like a dire picture, you know, all of these things when said like that and presented. But I do think that a lot of organizations are adapting very well and have seen benefits, not from COVID, but from their response to COVID for the organization, the expertise and the programming they're able to do. But there is a serious funding need. Like that is the main thing. To be, and really for unrestricted funding. That is what organizations need, and the ability to get their staff back on board so that they're not operating with a very, very small crew of people, which for many organizations has been reduced to an executive director and like a part-time person who hangs shows or something, you know? So that's pretty much, and I'm happy to now discuss this with you or answer questions, but that's kind of my read on from reading, reporting, and applications to us over the past several months.
Oh, thank you. That was super informative. On the fly. I asked her yesterday. She's like, got this done. Thank you very much. I don't really have any questions.
I have a
Yeah.
couple.
Yeah.
When you said that there are some of the organizations coming from the city are competing with existing ones, can you give an example of one of those? Or
I don't want to like call out a
yeah,
specific.
I'm not trying to like, but I'm just curious about that.
Well, for example, I'll give you an example, a vague example, but I could go back and get you the exact name, but there were some things popping up last year, for example, where there were groups coming up that had just moved to this region. We're saying we're going to do the first ever arts festival in the Hudson Valley. You know, I'm seeing a lot of things pop up where there's a lack of awareness of what already exists here. And so I don't want to, I'm not going to throw out a specific right now, but if you have further questions, you can feel free to I can give you my email and we can talk about it more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great to do an article. You know, we've talked about maybe me doing an article showing how artists are really suffering, and this would be a big part of that. So I will contact you afterwards.
Okay, cool.
You're on the Arts Mid-Hudson website. I can find you. Lila?
I'll put my email in the chat, and my name's Lilia. Yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Or did you have a question?
I was curious, Lilia, and you were saying, thank you. That was an incredible presentation, that you thought that some organizations were paying more attention to underserved audiences than previously. Could you, I don't know if this is improper to ask, but I'm curious about the kinds of ways that they're doing that, kinds of audiences they're picking out. And because it'd be great for us to know so that we can tell other organizations that these organizations are doing that. Sure.
So I'll be frank. So what we were really pushing during our granting process is that we were really interested in funding organizations that were not just trying to increase the representation of their artists, which is of course something that we want and encourage every single year, but we are really interested in organizations who are trying to bring in new voices into the power structure within their organization and give people actual power to influence the programming that they're going to put on. I've seen less of that. I've seen more of organizations trying to expand the diversity of the artists in their gallery exhibits or in their annual season, which of course we want and is good. But we would really like to see more organizations bringing people on board who can, who are representative of their own communities and can direct programming before the programming gets decided for a community. Instead, a representative from that community has the power to influence what direction that program takes and, really inform whether or not it's serving that community well. And so I think there's been a clear interest in increasing the number of Black artists that are shown in galleries that are performing in our region, that have access to being paid by organizations to do work. And I've also seen a very clear interest in working more with being more inclusive in terms of different disabilities and access to programming. And I could give you some examples. If you send me an email, I can send you specific examples. But I think one thing that we've seen less of is a clear way on how to deal with the lack of access to technology. There have been some organizations that have been doing really successful lending programs, like the Artifact in Poughkeepsie. They were lending out laptops for their students, tablets, so they could continue to do, the filmmaking and animation and video programs and educational programs that they were doing. And so those have been really successful, but there's not that many organizations in our region that have access to that kind of equipment to turn out that kind of a program. So what I said before is really it. It's like there's this strong interest, but having the people power to execute it is an issue. And then also really like going deeper within the organization and figuring out how can we make this a program that really serves and is informed by that community and not just something we're deciding that community wants. But it's going to take time. I mean, there's been a lot of organizations for many years who, didn't have any understanding or interest in expanding their audience. They were happy and content with the audience they had. And I think that the changing demographics of the region, the influx of new people and many people leaving Kingston, being forced out of Kingston in many situations, is impacting and making it clear to them that they need to have a new way of accessing new audiences.
Yet another, I was very intrigued about your comments about gentrification, and I mean, is that like the first word it's on all of our mouths, our lips now? How do you see the impact on organizations?
I mean, again, it's that I'll give a personal example. I lived in Kingston up until this summer, and I had to leave Kingston. I was pretty much forced out.
It wasn't your behavior.
No. And it was clearly related to the pandemic. It was clearly related to an interest to charge more for the apartment. And so I think there's a lot of people that, audiences are being pushed out, employees are being pushed out. And then the response from organizations is either to try to cater to the new audiences or to really say, we're going to double down and try to figure out how we can serve the people who have been here. Or, of course, for many organizations, they're not really looking at it that way at all. But I would say the impact on many organizations, in my, observation, is that people are in flux. People are leaving. People are dealing with potentially losing their home and may not be interested in interacting with arts and cultural programming. And so it's a very, they're intertwined, and we all know that arts can be used as a tool to fuel gentrification. I think some people may have heard of that controversy in Newburgh where there was please don't quiz me on the details, but real estate companies hiring artists to paint murals to kind of like increase the value of a property. We've seen that all over the country. And so that is something that needs to be considered carefully by everybody's actions right now, because we're really under assault in terms of like the amount of change that's happening rapidly and the amount of people that are being pushed out rapidly.
Yeah, toward that, I just want to make a comment. I've had a couple of conversations with some of these new to the area arts organizations. And I think an example would be the Upstate Art Weekend that I guess started I didn't even know it existed, right? So this is what I'm talking about, like an art weekend in Upstate, and I don't know it exists. And it was organized by Stoneleaf Residency, which is a fairly new residency, and in Esopus. But anyway, and I just talked to another artist in residence going to be at the Eureka House. They came this summer. They're going to come, or they came in November, but they're going to come back, and they're going to be here for the arts weekend. And so they're going to have this thing, and it's like that person actually asked me, how do you feel about that? And I have to say exactly what you're talking about in terms of, you look at housing, there's like two things happening. So it's not like they're bringing something from the community. They're not playing with the community. They're bringing artists up, and I would love to have some artists in residence here, so that I could have, mentors in the African-American community coming in here and teaching, so that my kids could see themselves in these artists. And the pool for that here, I've had a hard time, like almost impossible time finding those artists to teach here. And partly because I have no money and I'm just little, but the point is that there's no interaction here. There's no, we haven't established those bridges yet. So it becomes kind of two cities, and it could potentially, and this woman who's coming in as a resident actually specifically asked me how I felt about that, which was the first time. And I was like, wow, that's a really astute question. And I'm ambivalent about it because I support, it's great that artists are coming up in residence. I wish they would send them to me. I wish they would pay for it and send them to me. We're working out something like that with the Eureka House for a grant we're doing, So there are ways that we can work together, but seems like this two-tiered system, like, oh, wow, I have this beautiful property. Let me share it with the people that I know in New York, and it's a little scary because it does kind of promote this two-tiered art system.
I think one thing that we have to also kind of take into consideration is that when we're in contact with people like that, we should be telling them to come to Arts Commission meetings. We should be sharing the Arts and Culture Master Plan links. We should be trying to be those emissaries. That's part of one of our thing that we can do in being in this group of people, is being able to, that's one of the things I always do. Anytime somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I'm new to the area, or this and that, the other thing, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to show up, but at least kind of like letting them know who some of these players are, because with our local resources, we have some people, all here on this call, who are doing incredible jobs of outreach, but we all know, even amongst ourselves, people who've lived in Kingston for years will be like, what's ask? I don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. People who have been showing art, making art in this community will be like, I don't know what the lace mill is. So it's like that level of communication, is something that we know we kind of are struggling with, even with locals, to use that term. So I really think, one of the things that the Arts Commission can do is be a space for that. I know there are a lot of projects that have come in recently that have made presentations at the Arts Commission, have, run their ideas by us. And it's a really great way to be a little bit more in the loop of what's happening. So maybe we could get that person who's doing the Upstate Arts. Same thing with Eureka House. I've told them a couple of times, like, you should come to the Arts Commission meeting, and really kind of reinforce that this is a space where we can start doing some of that bridge building, because this is a meeting that is open to the public. Anyone is welcome to come. And if they can't attend, they can also watch it after. So it also has that added element of being able to be, we didn't have that opportunity before because we were in person. So if you didn't see it, you didn't see it. But now we have the benefit of, if you didn't get to attend this meeting, you can at least go and watch it on YouTube or something like that. So it might be a good way for us to maybe use our resources here to be able to do some of that bridge building.
Lynn?
I have a quick question for Laura. Laura, though, that I'm not familiar with these Eureka House and the other organization you mentioned. Are they interested at all in working with local artists for their residency, or they're bringing people in from the outside?
Well, so far they're bringing people in from the outside, but they're interested. They're just on their own trajectory, I think. Eureka House is actually next week going to we're starting an internship program with them in their publishing part of their project. So we're gonna have a pugster in there, or one of our graduates.
Are they the ones that Judy Pfaff's
Yes.
mentioned? Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. But I'll reach out to Sam and I'll just invite him to our next meeting, because I think it'd be great for people to know. And it's interesting because, I guess I have a connection with, so, he goes, well, do you think it would be good if we did this, this, and this? And I'm like, well, I think it'd be good if you worked with everybody here to do that, and that, so he's open, so I'll invite him. I think it would be very informative. I don't know the Stone Leaf person, but it's on my list to introduce myself.
Anne?
Yeah, thanks, Susie. I think this warrants a much deeper conversation than what we're having here today. And thinking maybe over the summer, whether it's part of Celebration of the Arts or Art Walk, that period of time, We should develop a forum, and hopefully maybe it could even be done at City Hall by then with limited attendance, but with people registering. There are a lot of things to be concerned about here. And Lilia brought a lot of them up. And I think that the pathway to helping some of this is to create the conversation, but also to create policies around where we stand and what we think and how we're going to move this forward. I mean, we really need to be organized and maybe even develop a statement that comes from the commission about the future of Kingston, because we are the Kingston Arts Commission. The very vitality and energy that we're bringing to this city, we could end up driving out of this city if we don't develop policies around it to support the people who are here and to create the housing and all the equity and justice that the city deserves. So I think we should be part of that broader conversation through the arts. So I'd like to see maybe the commission spearhead something in one of those two avenues this year.
Ward, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Lara said about the Upstate Arts Weekend, and the woman who, I've met her once, the woman who runs it, Helen Tubman. She is going to be either the guest curator or juror of an upcoming Dorsky Museum exhibition. So she is getting involved. It could be a Hudson Valley Artist Show, I'm not positive, but if it is, that would be great because she'll get to know, more Hudson Valley artists. But I don't know a great deal more, but I know that she and our new director, Anna, have made a connection and get along well.
Okay, Lilia, thank you very much. That was really informative. And you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you like, but if you don't, thank you.
No, I have to go to another meeting actually, but thank you so much for having me anytime.
Okay.
Thank you, Lilia.
Yeah.
All right.
It was
Be
great,
well.
Lilia.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Addie, you want to update us on the master plan?
Sure. So we are getting into task force. We are, hopefully most of us have scheduled our meetings for last 3 weeks of April. So we are just kind of moving along with that. Like I said, this is kind of our last step before we get into final draft mode. So we are on schedule. And I sent out an email earlier in the week. So just to kind of clarify that, since there are some folks who maybe want to participate on multiple task forces, or just, folks who maybe can't allocate the full amount of time to being a part of the meetings, but still want to provide feedback, that door is completely open. You could do it via the workbook if you find that that's a method that works for you. But if it doesn't feel like that's the kind of way you'd like to communicate about it, you can go about it in different ways. If you want to, write it out, however you want to go about it. It doesn't have to be too drawn out. The thing I like about the workbooks is that it breaks down recommendations into action items. So it's kind of like, instead of saying like for an example, like community calendar, it's kind of like, okay, how would we go about that? Where would we find like that kind of thing? So I kind of like that format, but Lord and I discussed that at our last project management call, and they said that they're totally open to whoever wants to provide feedback for things. So I'm excited about that. And then I think that's pretty much kind of all I have that's really changed. The only other thing that's kind of exciting is that our GIS team at the city has started plotting out our points on the cultural asset inventory, and they did update that form. So now we have a map that has all of our cultural assets mapped out so that folks can see that, which I think is pretty exciting. So I'm building out like a formal page for it on Engage Kingston and on the city website, but I can put the link in the chat so that folks can see that. But one of the nice things about the cultural asset inventory is that it's going to stay around forever. So kind of what it is that once a month, Greg and I are going to go through and sort through all of the, and Greg is our GIS specialist at the city. We're going to go through all of the entries that we get, update them, add them to the map. So it'll be a really great way to just have a city-owned resource. It's very much a city element, so that feels really nice. And yeah, so it's something that you can share to folks as they come to the community, have questions about where things are. And another nice thing about it too is that it just kind of serves as visual aid, which I think is really exciting because we don't really have a lot of that. A lot of our formal maps of Kingston, of course we have Google Maps, the blessed tool, but in terms of things,
Says adult on it.
like
You might
the
have got, look underneath the top row.
so that's something that we can use to kind of share with other folks. And again, it's visual, so it's right there ready to go. So yeah, that is kind of all I have for the updates. So if anybody has any of the task forces that they're kind of interested in being a part of, just let me know. And I don't think any of these meetings are necessarily closed. So if you do maybe want to attend a meeting or something like that, maybe reach out to one of the chairs and see if that's appropriate, so we can figure that out.
Very good. Thank you. So,
Can
Melanie,
I interrupt for a second, please? Can we, in a way, it's kind of going back to a previous conversation about funding and what's going on. It was a question for you, Peter, whether you had any perspective on this from the county and what's been going on, whether the county is going to be getting money from the state and or the federal government that might help. And I read about some blow up about UPAC. Is there
I can talk about this now if you'd like. It's on the agenda for later, but I'm
I'm sorry, I don't have the
happy-
agenda in front of me.
I'm happy to jump into it now if nobody cares.
sure.
So, okay, so yeah, UPAC. So let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about funding in general. So the county has a program called a committee called legislative programs, and there are X amount of dollars allocated to legislative programs and it's worked out through the budget process. And then basically there's a number that emerges after the budget process is sort of worked out. And then the committee at that point has been like vetting people that they want to try and fund. And it sort of has become like a little like pushing your favorite in front, and people, are sometimes sympathetic to the arts, but more often pushing away from arts funding because they feel like there's more important things. And so that's when I talked to you all last year about like, we got to rally, we got to get the arts funding. And so that actually helped save some funding, especially for Arts Mid-Hudson. But the UPAC funding, I was so mad about this because I had fought so hard to keep that in the budget. And then the very last minute, someone like threw a wrench into it and got that funding pulled. And I went back and I was like, you have got to be kidding. And that has now been reversed. So I do think that the UPAC funding is going to get through again. But it's this willy-nilly kind of like last minute grab for like who can scream the loudest kind of thing. So what I'm doing is, it's been a big process with the Legislative Programs Committee, but I'm taking it step by step to systematize the way that legislative programs are funded in the county. And so what's happening is now I just wrote up a resolution that got passed, which is now asking for the budgeting folks in the Ways and Means Committee to actually come up with a number way ahead of budget season that is going to be our legislative programs number. So we will know well in advance, this is the pot we have to work with. It might not all get approved when it comes to budget time, but we'll generally have a sense of like, this is what our pot is. The other thing that we're going to do is we are going to create a matrix of here's who we want to fund. And I'm going to get input from all the legislators, and they're going to say, well, I really want to fund this. I want to fund that. I think we should, have it spread across this geography, or we should have it spread across these types of funding. So I'm going to compile all that and try and come up with some sort of matrix or rubric that we can be looking at what we're funding against. And then we're also having conversations about whether this is something that is right for the Legislative Programs Committee to be vetting, or do we need the assistance of an outside organization who does this professionally? So there's a lot of conversations about this, but what I'm hoping for is that we come up with a process that we have a sum of money that we know we're roughly working with, that we send out information to all possible, they call them non-county agencies, because county agencies are funded in the county budget. So non-county agencies would then get an opportunity to then send us information about a proposal, basically. And we'd get to see their 501c3, we'd get to see their back financials, are they a legit organization? And then we would kind of run that against this matrix of, well, this is what we're looking to fund, this is how much funding dollars we have. And then we would basically, as a committee, as a Legislative Programs Committee, we would then send that to Ways and Means and say, this is what our suggestions are for funding for legislative programs. So it would take it out of the mosh pit of last minute, like, this is my favorite. No, this is my favorite. And it would make it a much more calm process, as well as a much more thought out process. The other piece that we talked about was that it could also change from year to year. One year we could say, hey, we really want to focus on women artists, or we want to focus on serving domestic abuse, or whatever it is that we come up with. I'm just sort of riffing there, but we could come up with housing issues, what we just talked about. We really want to focus on equitable housing. So we could use those legislative program dollars to be more specific. I think it will be more equitable, and I think it'll have greater impact when it's all said and done. But making the sausage is a whole different thing. So I'm in the process of trying to make the sausage right now and get it. And the committee's really, it's bipartisan. We're all in agreement that this should be happening. And I'm just slowly moving this through with the help of the chairman of the legislature, of the committee. So that's kind of where things are at right now. To your question about like larger pots of money coming in from the state or from the feds, I don't know where that's going to end in terms of legislative programs or anything like that. So I have not heard where those monies are going to come. I do know that we did better than we thought we were going to do on sales tax last year. There was a lot of concern about that, but you know, there were a lot of people coming up from the city. There were a lot of services that were used. And so the county was not as hit as they thought they were going to be. Same with the city. I think Addie probably knows that the city wasn't hit as hard. So there are monies that are going to be coming. I'm not sure where they're going to go, but I will try and find out, and I'll get back to you on that.
And a lot of bottles of wine were sold.
So what do you all think of what I just proposed about the legislative dollars?
I don't know. I think you're doing something that's really rational, and and takes it out of the last minute and someone going into his pocket and saying, here, now. But I also don't know how, for the arts organizations, you distinguish between, oh, well, they're going to Arts Mid Hudson, for the UCC SPF grant versus when they don't.
Right. I agree that I think it's a little risky for specific arts funding. But I think what's going to happen is I think that, when we're vetting these, we're going to look at the history of organizations and who they impact and how they impact. And so an organization like Arts Mid Hudson is definitely going to rise to the top because they have such a great track record. And so I just sat in on the granting panel for Arts Mid Hudson for their last round of the decentralization grants. And just the questions that they ask their artists and the people that they fund, it's just such a well thought out process that I think that's really going to serve. And I think the other thing that it's going to do is once organizations have to kind of file a request from us in a detailed way, then the naysayers aren't going to be able to say, well, we don't want to fund UPAC because they don't do anything. It's going to show this is actually what their impact is. And this is how many people they're serving and who they're serving. Because I tried to make that argument over and over again. And I just kept getting slammed with, we're paying for their lights and they're not even open. I was like, you're so short-sighted. This is not what they do. Look at the impact they have. Look at how many thousands of people they're serving with their online programs. And anyway, I was just like, I was like talking to the wall sometimes, but I hope that what this will do is concretize the value of these organizations and allow us a little bit more systematic way to fund them.
But it's not going to turn into something where there are going to be more major organizations, like major arts organizations like UPAC, that are going to have the major organizations program that goes either through the county or through Artsman Hudson.
I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking.
Like UPAC has never been part of the DEC program because they have a special line item and they get, a lot more money than the DEC program gives out. But are they going to, why shouldn't there be other organizations, if they have a budget as big as UPAC, that also get money of that scale?
I think any organization is going to be able to apply. We will have a pot of money that will then, like it is now, there's a pot of money there, and it's just people who are in the know, or people who have, what I found is that organizations that have traditionally been funded year after year, it becomes almost like, well, we funded them last year, we funded them the year before. What I'm hoping is that we spread the wealth a little bit more, and that we're actually looking at, organizations that need a little bump. I think there's also a desire for, I've heard a lot of legislators say this, that they don't want to be the main funding source for organizations. What they want to do is be seed funding to help them get on their feet and help them move on and apply for other funding and kind of grow and develop. And I'm of two minds with that, because I've run nonprofits where a line item has always been like funding from the city or funding from the county. And so I understand, and we have relied on that. And I also understand the desire for the county to be saying, we're seeding you to grow, and we're trying to help you. So I see both sides on that one.
Thank you.
One thing, especially with the Bardavon piece, that was real personal. So, the
Absolutely.
idea of having this kind of more formal impact statements that kind of takes the personal out of it, like here are the stats. That's one way to avoid that kind of obnoxious behavior that we just saw.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? All right, so update on the Mellon Foundation. We had our meeting on Monday, and our next step is I'm going to craft a 300-word statement. 300 words.
Jewel.
A what?
A 300-word jewel.
Yes, and no more than 1,000 characters to pass around to the committee. We did receive, and I sent it, I think I sent it to all of you. There were a number of projects that, people gave us a little blurb about. And what was really wonderful about all three projects is that they really all kind of fit together. So I'm going to craft something and send it out to the committee. We're going to meet again next month, and hopefully we'll have something that we can submit after that. And then as far as the Harriet Tubman statue or monument or whatever you want to call it, as far as Harriet goes, she is available November and December. I did speak with Odyssey Wooford, who is, her husband is the sculptor, and she has set us aside that time, and we do need to send in a contract and a check for half of the amount. So I'm happy to front that. I don't want to pay for it myself. But I can front the money, but I know we were going to do some fundraising. So, I'll talk to Margie and see if maybe, she can do something or how we want to move forward with that.
What's the number we're talking about, Susie, or approximate?
I believe it's $1,000 a month to rent sculpture. So it would be $1,000, and then there's that's just for the rental of the sculpture. Then there are some other costs that include insurance for the 2 months that it's here, and also the installation. I know that when we talked to the folks from the Newburgh Library, they said that they had gotten that part of it donated from the union, and
Wait, Tara.
maybe we can get some kind of donation for that. So it's gonna move forward if you guys everybody seemed to be in agreement that we should move forward for November and December of next year.
So we're talking about 2 months, so we need a 1 month down payment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So I thought the approximate total is $5,000.
You too.
That's with the installation and all of that kind of stuff. The
Travel.
specific rental of the sculpture is, I think maybe it's 1,200 a month. I'm not sure, but it's about $1,000 that we need for a down payment.
Okay.
I might have missed the part of the conversation. I'm sorry if I did, but were we talking about doing something with the library with this, and they had some funding, or? is that
Yes,
still
that's
part
why
of
I
the mix?
said I would talk to Margie.
Could they pony up the deposit?
I'll ask her.
Okay.
We need to move pretty quickly on this. So, as I said, I can front the money and then hopefully get reimbursed.
It'd be nice if you didn't have to do that, truthfully, and just
Yeah.
keep it all clean books wise. If they could actually just cut a check right away.
But
Yeah.
also we need a nonprofit, what do you call that?
Organization.
Conduit, whatever that word is.
A fiscal sponsor.
We
Thank
can help with that. Matt already approved it. So it's a matter, I can't speak because I have to bring this before the board, but we already approved that we would help fundraise for it and also do programming around it.
Okay.
So again, it gets down to where it's going to be deposited. And I think that is a really important consideration because I think visibility will create more of an impact. And I know Ione feels it would nicely fit into Deep Listening Plaza. I think somewhere on Broadway would be a great idea. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think either there or the library would be
Yeah,
wonderful.
I like those two places
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah. So there it is.
Because it's neighborhood, and I do recall. I think I recall Margie saying that she had the 5,000.
Yeah, or at least she would be able to cough up a lot of.
Yeah, and
remember
Midtown
5,000.
can help with this too. Mad can help. We've approved. Our board is behind this project.
When I talked to Odyssey, she said that Harriet had been in Peekskill it was December and January, I think, or January and February. And she said the statue is absolutely beautiful in the snow.
Oh, good.
So, and November and December are still relatively nice. And, you can still do things outdoors at that time. So I think it'll be great. So, all right, next COVID updates from the city.
Yes, so I just wanted to let y'all know kind of a little bit of some updates on the regulations for gatherings and things like that. Governor Cuomo did release some information on the 2nd of April, but I did, we've been getting a lot of requests coming into the city of just the past week. I mean, every day there has been a new request for events, and a lot of folks who are still kind of wondering how these regulations have changed. So there's a 30-page PDF available on the New York State website that I definitely encourage anyone who is considering having an in-person event to read it through all the way. It is just really, there's a lot of information in there. Just kind of like some key things to pull out. Some of those numbers look really exciting, like, oh my God, 500 people, but the majority of the venues in Kingston in particular are not going to be able to accommodate that. So that 33% capacity is still in effect. So if you can have a certain amount of people, then you might be able to get to that point. But most of our venues are going to be limited to the 33% capacity. That's for indoor and outdoor. The only thing that has changed a little bit is that the capacity limit does not now include event staff, which it did before. So before, when you were thinking about how many people you had to have in a space, you had to take your event staff into consideration. I know that vaccination has people feeling really great. Got my second poke right before this meeting, so feeling pretty good. But one of the first things they tell you is that's 2 weeks. And even with vaccination, one thing to just take into consideration is that you do need to figure out how you're going to have people prove that they were vaccinated. I've started playing around a little bit with the Excelsior Pass. Oh, my phone is like not registering. But you don't get access to that until 2 weeks after your final dose. And then in addition to that, the vaccination card that you get is just a piece of paper. So that's one thing that has been on a lot of people's minds about that. There are different regulations for if you can prove your entire list of attendees is either negative for COVID-19 or has received their vaccination. The one thing that has not changed from last year is everything is on the onus of the event organizer. So that's one of the reasons why I'm telling everyone, we're not doing that like kind of breakout of the regulations on the city website. We want to encourage anyone who is doing this, you got to read through the regulations. And if you can't kind of do that first step, it might be an indicator that an in-person event is maybe not in your future. But there is a lot of like little small nitpicky things. The nice thing is that we're going to be able to have music performances, dance performances, all those things we've been wanting to see. There are a lot of different regulations for different things. I mean, we're talking about, woodwind breath instruments need to be separated from the rest of the performers. Standing versus seated audience, mixed audiences. There's a lot of different things in there. So one of the things that I've been encouraging a lot of people to do if you are thinking about having an event is to one, just accept the reality of having to have a COVID officer. That is something that just has to happen. There has to be somebody whose only position is dedicated to enforcing safety regulations. And that person needs to be there they need to basically be the first person on site and the last person off site. So that's something to take into consideration. One of the things the regulation points out that I thought was really interesting is that, again, it is up to the event organizer to make sure that people aren't, you see your friend in the parking lot, you want to go over and talk to them. Like that's something that needs to be regulated as well. Ulster County has a separate page. I'm going to just pop this into the chat. We put together like a quick special events page for on the city website, which links over to the county website. They have a little bit more information on private events like weddings, that kind of thing. So there's a little information in there. The most, like I said, the big one is that we can have music because that's been something folks have been wanting a lot. But yeah, it's definitely, I've been telling everybody everything that we did last summer is pretty much back. Nothing has really lightened up. The only thing that's really changed is the amount of people. But again, that is still something that's not 100%. Like, there are still a lot of restrictions in place. So the city is not saying no outright, but we are definitely going to be looking at special event applications in a really different manner. We're not requiring a COVID safety plan, but if you are thinking about having an event, I just think you should have one regardless. But I do think it would help your application if you had one, because then we don't have to like ask those questions. We know what your strategy is for how you're going to accommodate COVID. And yeah, once that Excelsior Pass becomes a little bit of something that people have more access to, we'll learn a little bit about what that looks like. Looks like it's, QR codes, that kind of thing is something that comes up on your phone. You still have to do temperature screenings. You still have to provide masks. You still have to provide hand sanitizer. One of the things we've been suggesting is that, registration is still so important because that's how we are able to manage outbreaks. we need to know who's testing positive, who attended. We need to be able to get in contact with people. So pre-registration is definitely something I would still consider. If you want to be able to accommodate people that are coming off, who are just showing up, walk-ins, I would have a separate line for that. Maybe you could have 3 lines, one for people who pre-registered, one for walk-ups, and like one for people who just have the Excelsior pass and can like kind of go through. But regardless, every person, including event staff, needs to have their temperature checked, needs to provide a health screening. And I am encouraging everyone to embrace the waiver. You really want to make sure that you have some documentation that people understand they're attending at their own risk. And then also for your staff. So people who work events are going to have to be tested bi-weekly. And so there's also some new information on how you do your rapid tests and things like that. So a lot of that information is available via the county website. They have a nice breakdown of it. I think the most challenging thing, and I think it's not strange, is food and drink at performances, at events, that kind of thing. That is going to be really challenging. And there is a whole separate page full of a long list of regulations related to food service. So if that is something you're thinking of incorporating into your event, just know that that's going to be a whole other set of considerations. But yeah, it's very much still going to be a regulated thing, but I'm just happy that there are a few more options for folks who are looking to do in-person events. So also just for clarity, while I can provide information on events, special events aren't processed through my department. So they're processed through the mayor's office. That's who the application goes through. It goes to Roy in the mayor's office, and he is kind of Lord of special events. So again, I'm just going to pop this link into the chat here so that folks have it, but it's just a quick breakdown. It has the links right to the state resources. The state has safety templates that you can use. And there will be a lot more information probably coming as we get more and more into the summer. But, I know that Cuomo is really pro getting arts venues back up. And getting performances happening again. So I do think that we're going to see some some supportive guidelines coming from the state, but there is still very much any gathering has an inherent risk to it. So you can do it safe, you can do it right, but that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of assisting Roy, and just in terms of communicating about events and just giving people as much information as possible. And the phase reopening thing, as we all know, kind of there was a little bit of a, we thought we were going through with the phase reopening, and now we've kind of seen after our surge at the end of last year that we're not necessarily on that same track. So it has been a little confusing for folks just to kind of know where we're at. But I'm sure that the governor's office is going to be kind of releasing some more guidance as we get further into the summer. So that is our COVID events update. Does anyone have any questions?
I guess I'm going to have to read this because Nancy and I have a Sinterklaas meeting on Wednesday.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, like I said, there are 2 separate documents. So there's a 4-page checklist that has kind of the mandatory and the recommended. That's a great place to start, but I really encourage going through that. It's brutal, but I really encourage going through the whole 30-page document, because that's the most recent thing. Some of the stuff that's listed on the governor's website hasn't been updated since 2020. So if you want the most up-to-date information, it is in the what they're calling the detailed guidelines. So when you go to the arts, indoor and outdoor arts entertainment venues, you'll see like brief guidelines, and then you'll see detailed guidelines. So if you click on that detailed guidelines, that'll give you more information.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
So speaking of events, I got an email last month from Laura Hope, and they are interested in doing a online music showcase. And Addie's already talked to the mayor about this, so he has approved it. And basically what they want to do is a weekly event for 1 month, 4 events total, highlighting 10 area musicians each week. And she said she wanted to do it in May, but I told her, I said, that's way too soon. But it doesn't look like online events are going to go away anytime soon. So they'll be pre-recorded and aired on Facebook and YouTube as if it was a live event. Artists will submit a music video or live performance, and they'll pair it with a short interview of each artist, and then talk about their experience as a musician this past year and about living in Kingston as a whole. They're going as extra incentives to tune in. They want to get gift certificates donated, doing music and art trivia in between asks, and viewers can read their answers, and they would win a gift certificate. And I think it's a good idea. And if you guys think so, I'll tell her to go ahead and run with it. So, okay.
I like it.
Yes, it's like a good idea.
Everybody's shaking their head. Okay, good.
Nodding.
So that is the end of our agenda. Any old business, any new business? Somebody, Lynn, you want to go first?
Yeah, I just want to mention the Todd Samara website. So Nancy and I were talking about this, and it was decided that that would be a really good way to communicate and kind of keep his legacy alive. So we got an estimate from Rick at MAD about what it would cost, and it was a lot more money than we thought. And we ran it by Tom Samara, Todd's brother. And Tom really wants the fund to be sustainable and to fund artists. But after we reviewed it with Rick, it seemed like this would be a good investment of the money. So we're going ahead with it. Rick's designed it. I've written most of the copy. We have a homepage that gives a brief summation about Todd, and then there's more about him if you hit the about, and then there's another link for the art fund, explaining what the art fund is. There's a donate button, and then we're going to have a partial catalog. That was one reason we thought this was a really good idea, a way to get his work out. And there will be works for sale, and we're talking about maybe printing, doing some prints of some of his things, and also the website will be a way to announce events. So I've written a lot of the copy, and I'm waiting to hear back from Rick, but I think it's going to be live pretty soon. And of course, it's being hosted by MAD. So I think any donate or anyone buying something, we're not going to have a PayPal faction. I think it's going to go through MAD.
Mhm.
I mean, Rick knows all about how that will work. But anyway, I just want to mention that. And then I guess I was just talking to Ann about, we have to start thinking about the application for the award, which is coming up. So anyway, I'll let you know when we have it up and running.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Ione?
Oh, I just wanted to say that we are doing a concert, Talking Gong, which will happen. Looks like it's the 29th. I've been talking with Addie about it, and it's interesting. So this will be it's a birthday concert celebration, Pauline's birthday, Deep Listening Plaza, with all the COVID elements. It's done in conjunction with a Swiss organization that is doing similar events of The Witness, a piece called The Witness, which is a lot of fun throughout the world. So speaking of maps, they have a map that will have the Kingston event, which will be the premier event of a whole bunch of the witnesses all over. And it's interactive, so you press the button on the map, and you have Kingston is on the map. So I think it's going to be great, and I'll send you a better description of it now that I think that we can do it. Actually, the things that we did when we had the other concert with the Talking Gong, when we had the concert with the green lights over there, we did most of those protocols at that time. And I think a lot of artists are used to doing this rapid testing and different things. So I think it's going to be okay. We're going to do it. Just wanted to let you know.
Good. Peter?
Yeah, the LGBTQ Center is going to be participating in something called the Kingston Stroll, which is happening over Memorial Day weekend. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the whole bottom floor and create, I think I might have mentioned this, create like a maker space and invite 6 makers. It's going to be the whole event is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, but I'm only going to be open there Saturday and Sunday. So I put out a call for LGBTQ makers, and I've gotten about half a dozen people so far, but I'd love to get it a more full roster, because I think what I'll do is invite 6 of them for Saturday and 6 of them for Sunday, so we can showcase 12 people's work. The other thing I want to do is we have great walls. So I would love to hang somebody's work for sale, So if there's somebody that who's a queer artist and would love to show their work, we'll try and put it up and, get them sold. So just wanted to throw that out there. They can just respond to info@lgbtqcenter.org, and they can apply that way. Thanks. Oh, I'm also looking for piano players, where I'm refurbishing our grand piano in the main floor, and I would love to have music there the whole time. So if there's piano players, and I might have a small stipend for people to play. So.
Ward, did you have something?
I just wanted to tell you a little bit of an update on the Ben Wigfall show at the Dorsky. I'm not sure that you all know that the Virginia Museum is going to be borrowing the exhibition.
Yeah, I saw that.
Ben Wigfall is from Richmond, and there's still a connection there. When they acquired his work, he was the youngest artist whose work they'd ever acquired. He was 21, but the Dorsky is not in the habit of traveling exhibitions, so it was especially exciting to me that this is happening. And I want to also say a very kind word. It'll be the first kind word I say about Richard Firmes. But no, Richard is doing an incredible inventory of Wigfall's work. And it's all set out the way a museum would do it, with the image and all the different information, doing it chronologically, and he's doing a really impressive job. So.
Great. Ward, what is the date of the show now? I mean, did it get pushed back?
It's been delayed. I think it's 23. I'm not positive if it's 22 or 23.
September 22.
Right. I wrote a whole article for Chronogram about it. And then when I handed it in to my editor, he said, "Oh, you mean it's opening this February?" And I said, "No." Oh. It was all very clear in the information. He just spaced out. So I guess it'll run in a year from now. But anyway.
It was because they of the Virginia venue that they decided it was well worth delaying it.
Right. I know specifically because we're writing a grant to work with them, doing the education thing. So it's actually opening September 22, and it's for 3 months instead of 6 months, so that it can travel. So that changed. So it's September to December 2022.
Right. I interviewed the curator, the guy at Bard. Mm-hmm. He's amazing. I mean, I'm just so excited about it because it sounds like his whole approach is kind of new. The way it's going to include community and the issues that it will address that usually aren't addressed.
It's a really, I think it's a step for the Dorsky, and it makes me very happy. I mean, the collaboration with Lara, with the draw is just something the Dorsky had never been inclined to do before. And the fact that they're going on Radio Kingston all the time and talking about different aspects of the exhibition. I think it's a really that a Kingston artist could have done this for a major county institution, I think is terrific.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's great. And Susie?
Yes.
Just to mention, we're taking that bold step, and Midtown Arts District is planning a celebration of the arts the first Saturday of August through the second Saturday. And it will start off with a live performance of Arm of the Sea in the park next to the Metro. And we hope to have, a better day, better times by then, and have one of our first live outdoor events in a long time. So,
Peter?
I just wanted to mention, that sounds great, Anne, thank you. I just wanted to mention, there's a new program at Bard. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's the Open Society, network, and it's called the Center for Human Rights in the Arts. Has anybody heard of it yet? Pretty amazing. So they're doing some really cool stuff. We just at the center, we just helped promote a trans artist out of the West Coast who was doing just really incredible work related to body and body image. And there's another queer artist that's going to be they're doing a lecture series, and yeah, well worth checking out. Really interesting, cutting edge kind of stuff. So
When I hear Open Society, it sounds like George Soros.
Yeah, 500
well,
million, right?
I was gonna say half a billion.
Open Society is fun. It's a, yeah,
Oh.
it's officially called the Open, yeah, the OSIN Center for Human Rights and the Arts is what it's called. So,
Ocean?
and you saw that Bard just got a $500
Yeah.
million.
500 million.
Billion.
George
Billion
Soros.
with a B.
Billion.
He wasn't an alum, was he?
No, but he's been involved with Bard for a long time now. Did a lot of funding for
Ex-wife started the Graduate Center in New York.
started the grad. He's been a long time supporter of the college, and so this was sort of the final. Leon sort of saying we're going to get an endowment. It's been Leon's done amazing things with the college, but always the question mark was, well, what's going to happen when Leon leaves? And so Leon has now fixed that question because we're going to have $1 billion endowment.
No, it's amazing. It's like and also the Mackenzie Bezos giving $1 million to the Y. It's like
Amazing. Yeah, it's really solidified the future of the college. I mean, this is a total game changer in the history of the college, and so I'm so thrilled. It's such a great resource for us here in the Hudson Valley. So.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. So I guess this is the end. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Anne? Anybody second? I own
Second.
second.
Mhm.
Okay, guys.
You're right. Thank you, Susie.
Addie, when
Thanks,
do you
Susie.
meet in
Good to see you.
person?
Thank you, Susie.